So chapter 9 is about photosynthesis. As I mentioned before, chapter 9 and 10, I used to do a one big unit. There's a lot of overlap between the two chapters, but the results were the test was a bigger test. Kids really struggled with it. And additionally, there were some areas, because there was overlap, when things were not exactly lined up, there was some confusion. So this is a little bit of a shorter chapter. I'm going to talk about the process of photosynthesis. And I will still talk about some of the concepts from chapter 12 because they do kind of apply here. So to start with, when you think about a plant, when you think about what something is, most people, if I had you close your eyes, I'd have you close your eyes, say visualize a plant, and it'd be something most likely from this image up here, right? It'd be a tree or a plant, flower or grass or a fern. But we also have areas of photosynthetic organisms that also do photosynthesis. So it's not unique just to plants. Okay, multicellular algae, protists, and cyanobacteria can do photosynthesis. So it is an important concept that kind of sets us up as a planet. The autotrophs, the things that generate that energy, will provide the basic energy levels to allow for other organisms like us to kind of feed off of it. So my point is we're going to use plants as our model species, just know other things also do photosynthesis. So a couple key concepts that are more of an kind of ecology basis, but we want to understand in order to help with this material. The first term is a heterotroph. Their role in an ecosystem or environment is to obtain organic material, and they do that by consuming something else. So a carnivore, for example, will eat another animal. A herbivore will eat plant material, so they're still eating another organism, and an omnivore will eat from either both areas. A lot of times we talk about things being omnivores. A lot of times they're like opportunistic omnivore. The good example I always think of is like a gorilla. People say, oh, it might be an omnivore. They're mainly going to be a herbivore. They mainly eat plants. But a lot of times there's a lot of insects and bugs that'll be crawling around the food they're eating. They'll pick those up for kind of some easy, cheap protein, but that's not a main source in their diet. So they're more opportunistic omnivores versus like true omnivores. Heterotrophs are always the consumer, as I mentioned. And again, heterotrophs are dependent upon photoautotrophs for food, and those photoautotrophs provide oxygen. Now, in deep sea vents, there are chemoautotrophs that use the chemical breakdown of sulfur compounds to generate energy. Again, very rare. We're going to try to stay in our lane, things that we do. Most of us don't eat off of that food chain. And therefore, we're going to stick to talking about photoautotrophs, things that provide us food. So a good example of a autotroph up there eating looks like a snake. Can't tell. All right, so what is photosynthesis? Why is it important? The idea simply is that it converts light energy into chemical energy. Okay, so the energy that comes down from the sun is going to be converted into chemical energy in the form of food that we can then consume, and it can be passed on to different energy levels. Again, using plants as our model species, most of this occurs in the leaves. The leaves are perfect little photosynthetic factories, and they're composed of a lot of the organelle that's responsible for doing photosynthesis, the chloroplast. There are about 500,000 chloroplasts in a little millimeter squared area on a leaf surface. And again, tightly compact, doesn't make sense to have a lot of those in the roots or other places. They're specialized parts of this plant to do photosynthesis. And again, their job is to take that light energy, convert it into sugar that can be used by the plant, but also used by things that eat it. And again, that's what we're going to talk about next chapter is cellular respiration. How do I actually get the energy out of that food? So that's what we're going to look at. So the chloroplast itself does a lot of things. It's really a chloroplast is just a plastid, a container that stores a very important pigment called chlorophyll. There's no Billy Madison people in here. There used to be an old movie called Billy Madison, and the teacher says chlorophyll, and Billy Madison says more like borophyll. It's a funny line. Mr. Poskichel or Mr. Lovell, they'll probably get it more than you guys will. It's still kind of a funny line. Anytime I hear chlorophyll, I think of that. But anyways, it is a pigment, and this is why when you go outside and you slide with jeans on or pants on and you get grass stains, you are pressing down upon the grass. That pigment is leaked out of those cells, and because it is a pigment, it will dye those jeans, and why it's a pain, and your parents are always ticked when they got to clean it out. But it's more than just a pigment. It is a very specialized pigment. And what it can do is it can absorb certain wavelengths of light. And those certain wavelengths of light will drive the synthesis or the making of organic compounds. A lot of times you'll hear people say it makes glucose. I will show you that it really doesn't make glucose. It's going to make another compound that can then be used to make glucose. Another common mistake as you're kind of looking at this. In order for this to occur, we need to get the correct gases in and out. It's going to use simple diffusion, as we learned last chapter. So it does it through the stoma. So you can see the stoma is on the bottom side of the leaf. It makes sense that it be on the bottom side of a leaf, because if we had a bunch of holes on the top, that'd be less area that sunlight could be taken in to do this reaction. So the holes are found down here. It's going to allow oxygen in, CO2 out, and it's going to follow basic diffusion. CO2 is going to be oh my gosh, this must be made the wrong. CO2 in, oxygen out. Sorry about that. So the CO2 is going to go in based on diffusion. There's more in the atmosphere than inside of the leaf. This is caused by the fact that once it's in here, it's going to be consumed in the reaction. And oxygen is going to be produced in this reaction. And by being produced, there's going to be more of it in the cell. So the cell, it'll actually naturally diffuse out. You can kind of see that in this diagram here. This is where the material will be found and diffusion will occur. We'll talk a little bit more about the water that's in there. The problem is because it's just an opening or like a pore, water can flow out too, and that can be a problem for the plant. We'll talk about adaptations that plants have to overcome this at the end of this chapter. So again, a leaf itself is just going to be an area that has a lot of different cells doing photosynthesis, some stomata to allow gas exchange so it can occur. The cells that are important that we're going to actually talk about doing this, the mesophyll, these are these lining of cells. And you can see we don't do a lot of, they're not very thick, they're right up here. Again, they're like solar panels, high concentrations of chloroplast to do photosynthesis. We're going to have a protective layer to prevent drying out, and a lot of times plants will use this to prevent maybe things from eating it. And the stomata you can see are on the bottom there. The mesophyll cells are basically big solar panels that have tons of chloroplast in them to allow photosynthesis to occur. The chloroplast itself, we'll talk about its structure. If you remember last chapter when we talked about different organelles, I didn't go into too much detail about the chloroplast because we didn't need to. The chloroplast has thylakoids, okay, and these are going to be stacks like so, and the surface of each one of these is where the chlorophyll is actually found. Okay, so this individual disc right there is called a thylakoid. The whole stack of them is called a grana. If my drawing is confusing, don't worry. I got really good pictures of this on the next slide. Okay, the space in between the thylakoids is called the stomata, and these are really important concepts that you need to pay attention to and learn, because when we talk about this process of photosynthesis, some stuff is going to happen on the thylakoids, and other stuff's going to happen in the stomata. So you should be able to identify and see those as we're going through. Again, not all the things on the slide are super important. Like we got to write everything down. It's just some of the information. Some of the diagram stuff will be on the next slide. If I do go too quick, the actual Google slide has all the information. You kind of go back and watch. So here's the diagram of the terms you really do want to write down. So this is a good diagram of the thylakoid itself. So you can kind of see in this diagram here, right? So this individual part right up there where I just kind of drew, that is a thylakoid, and it's a surface of a thylakoid. Surface of the thylakoid allows where sunlight will penetrate. This whole part of it, okay, is called the grana. We don't care too much about this. There is a double membrane. We mentioned that when we talked about the endosymbiotic theory. And there is an intermembrane space as well. So those are some terms that you may want to know, along with the thylakoid and the stroma. We don't care too much about that for now. And you can kind of see their functions and what they do. As you're kind of taking notes, I do want you to notice that the thylakoids themselves are not structured like that. They're not a straight column like a building, but instead they have this structure. What does this have that the top one does not? There's a lot more surface area, and that allows for more areas for which the sunlight can hit and penetrate and do photosynthesis. This is going to be the site that requires sunlight energy in order to occur. The second part is going to happen in the stroma. So we're going to divide photosynthesis up into two types of reactions, the light reaction and the dark reaction. We don't like those terms, we'll use better ones. The light reaction, the light independent reaction, and again, they happen at different locations. So that's why it's important to know the structure of these. Okay, next slide. Another really good diagram of this, again, if you're looking, it kind of has everything you need. Don't be surprised if this is on a quiz or a test, identifying these different parts. And then again, you need to know, we will learn where the reactions occur. Some of the reactions will take place on the surface of the thylakoids, others will happen in the stroma, okay? The light reaction happens on the thylakoids, that's why you need a lot of surface area. The light independent reaction, or the Calvin cycle, takes place inside the stroma. So whether you like this diagram, another diagram, your own diagram, make sure you're able to understand the parts of a chloroplast. Where it wasn't that important last chapter, it will be in this unit. And again, this is just an overall breakdown of what's going on. The leaves are factories for photosynthesis. This is the actual cell itself, protective layer. The mesophyll is going to have super chloroplast quantities. The stomata is where gas exchange occurs. If we were to actually look at a mesophyll cell, like we did underneath the microscope with the Elodea plant, you'll see this. This is the actual thylakoid, and then this is using a TM microscope, what it actually looks like. So a nice little diagram, has all the parts that we kind of need. All right, last thing I want to talk about is the reaction to photosynthesis. You should just have this memorized, know it, see it, and we'll kind of talk about it as we go through. So we're going to take carbon dioxide, we're going to combine it with water, okay? From the atmosphere, this comes from the roots. We need light energy, okay? And in the end, we're going to get sugar or glucose, some oxygen, and some water as well. I'm not too worried about this on that end here. It's more for balancing it. Again, great for chemistry. For us, we're going to focus in on CO2 plus water. It's going to give us sugar and oxygen. As I mentioned earlier, it could be glucose, it could be other things. We'll just say sugar for now. The only thing I don't like, if I had to redo this diagram a little bit, the one thing I would maybe change is I have my CO2 and I have my water. Gosh, I have bad handwriting on this. I'm not using a pencil. But light is not an actual reactant, so I kind of draw it in over here, so that's where I'd put light. And then if you're ever taking an AP test, you know, they might have you draw a diagram. One easy way to always get points that people kind of forget is to add down here, right in this area here, all these reactions will not take place without enzymes. So I would just add on my line right here, underneath that arrow or here, enzymes. Again, it's something that is always present. You need to have, this reaction will not take place if enzymes aren't present. So we take CO2 plus water with the input of light, enzymes, and produces sugar and oxygen. Important thing to note, if we don't have light, this reaction will never take place. We'll kind of talk more about that next time. But again, I would know this reaction here as we go. I would just add light reaction being inputted and enzymes underneath the arrow. Okay? All right. In this process, you can kind of follow what's going on here. The CO2 itself, okay, is going to be added to the sugar and also the water that is produced. The water itself, the oxygen comes from the water. And so this part of it is where we'll pick up tomorrow, next class I should say, talking about how this actually works. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Just know you should be able to follow this, and in this reaction as we go through, we're going to figure it out. If you understand the formula for this reaction, you're going to really understand the light reaction and the light independent reaction as we're going through it. You'll be able to pick it up pretty easily. And so I wouldn't necessarily write this down or memorize this, but you'll see we will follow this as we go through our unit. All right, that's all our notes for today. Not very long, and that's kind of intentional. Just wanted to get us introduced into the topic. You do have homework, which is on the agenda. It's on Canvas as well. It's at the end of these notes. So you'll want to finish, you're going to work on this chloroplast web quest. There's a copy up for everyone on the desk. Everyone will turn in their own copy. You will read and outline 9.1, and there's video notes that go with it. Make sure you submit those as one in your book. So you're not submitting it, you're putting it in your notebook. And that's it for homework. So at this point, your sub will be handing out the chloroplast web quests that are at the front. You will get with a partner, head over to lab, and you'll work on this for the remainder of the time. When you're done, you can go back to your seat, start your homework, and that's all I got. If you have any questions, email me. I'll be checking my email after I should be flying by the time you guys are in class, but after that, I should be able to respond to emails on Friday or Saturday while we're here in Vegas. So go Browns. Have a great day. See you guys next week.